The Alchemy of Conscience, Oskar Schindler, and the Metamorphosis of Pragmatism into Redemption. The banality of opportunity, the unlikely vessel in a moral vacuum, the historical and philosophical landscape of absolute evil. The Holocaust, or Shoah, stands in human history not merely as a period of unprecedented genocide, but as a profound metaphysical rupture. It represented the systematic, industrial-scale implementation of a philosophy of negation aimed at the physical and ontological annihilation of the Jewish people. Within this framework, as philosophers like Theodor Adorno and Emmanuel Levinas have argued, traditional ethical systems faltered. Adorno's famous dictum that to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric speaks to the crisis of meaning and representation that the event precipitated. The Nazi regime meticulously constructed a world where moral categories were inverted, complicity was normalized, obedience was valorized, and empathy was systematically extinguished as a weakness. It was a universe governed by what Hannah Arendt would later term the banality of evil, where ordinary individuals could perpetrate extraordinary atrocities through a thoughtless adherence to bureaucratic procedure and ideological dogma. Into this moral vacuum stepped individuals like Oskar Schindler, though initially he bore little resemblance to the savior of later memory. The environment of the general government, the Nazi-occupied territory of Poland, was not just one of oppression but of rampant, cynical opportunism. The forced Aryanization of Jewish businesses, the exploitation of slave labor, and the black market created a fertile ground for profiteers. The prevailing ethos was one of ruthless pragmatism, a survival of the fittest mentality, where moral considerations were a luxury few could afford and even fewer desired. It is within this context of normalized avarice and ethical collapse that Schindler's initial actions must be understood not to condemn him, but to highlight the astonishing distance his moral journey would traverse. The protagonist, a portrait of the amoral entrepreneur Oskar Schindler, arrived in Krakow in 1939 as the archetype of the amoral adventurer. He was a Sudeten German, a member of the Abwehr German military intelligence, a charismatic bon vivant, and an unprincipled businessman. His motivation was transparently self-interested, to capitalize on the economic opportunities presented by the conquest of Poland. By acquiring the formerly Jewish-owned Emalia enamelware factory, he positioned himself perfectly to profit from the German war machine. He was a master of the quid pro quo, using bribery, charm, and his Nazi party connections to grease the wheels of commerce. Schindler's early relationship with the Jewish workforce was fundamentally transactional. He employed them because they were cheaper than Polish laborers, and their wages were paid directly to the SS, making them a source of immense profit. His factory was not initially a sanctuary, but a site of exploitation, albeit one that was, by the horrific standards of the time, preferable to the ghettos and labor camps. There was no discernible moral compass guiding him. His actions were dictated by a calculus of pleasure, power, and profit. He embodied a form of radical pragmatism, a philosophy that judges actions solely by their efficacy in achieving desired ends, with no inherent regard for ethical principles. In this first act, Schindler was a creature of his environment, a successful parasite feeding on the carcass of a murdered civilization. The catalyst, the epistemological shock of witness. The transformation of Oskar Schindler from a profiteer into a protector was not a sudden, divine revelation, but a gradual process, an accretion of witnessed horrors that eventually breached the walls of his cynicism. This process can be understood philosophically as an ongoing confrontation with the face of the other, a concept central to the ethics of Emmanuel Levinas. For Levinas, the ethical relation is not derived from abstract codes, but from the primordial, unavoidable encounter with the face of another human being, which makes a silent demand "Thou shalt not kill." For Schindler, this confrontation occurred repeatedly. The pivotal moment, often cited, was the 1942 liquidation of the Krakow ghetto and the subsequent massacre at the Krakow Plazo concentration camp. From the hill overlooking the ghetto, Schindler and his mistress witnessed the brutal, senseless violence of the SS. He saw a little girl in a red coat, a vivid speck of humanity amidst the chaos, an image that would haunt him and later be seared into the cultural memory by Steven Spielberg's film. In that moment, the abstract, bureaucratic process of resettlement and liquidation was replaced with the visceral, undeniable reality of suffering individuals. The other ceased to be a category, Jews, and began to assume the faces of his workers, his accountants, his engineers. This was an epistemological shift, a change in the very nature of his knowledge. He moved from knowing about the persecution to knowing the persecuted. This shift is the essential precursor to any meaningful form of positive action. One cannot act to save humanity in the abstract. One can only act to save human beings. The sight of the girl in the red coat, the pleading of his secretary Helen Hirsch, the quiet dignity of his Jewish manager, Itzhak Stern. These individual faces began to impose an ethical demand that his pragmatic worldview could no longer ignore. The banality of evil was met with the beginning of an extraordinary conscience. Next part, the metamorphosis of purpose, from profit to protection as a calculated rebellion. The arsenal of the pragmatist, turning vice into virtue. What makes Schindler's story philosophically unique is not that a saint appeared in hell, but that a sinner recalibrated his entire moral economy. He did not shed his identity as a cunning, resourceful, and connected operator. Rather, he repurposed these very traits, which had once served his greed, into instruments of salvation. His genius lay in weaponizing the system's own corruption against its murderous intent. This was positive action not as naive idealism, but as sophisticated, strategic subversion. His methods were a masterclass in pragmatic resistance. Bribery as a moral currency. The same black market funds that once bought him luxury goods were now deployed to secure the lives of his workers. He lavished gifts of cognac, diamonds, and money upon SS officers like Amon Goth, the commandant of Plazo, not to gain commercial advantage, but to buy time, safety, and exemptions for the people on his now famous list. Productivity as a shield. Schindler brilliantly reframed the value of his workers. He argued, with fabricated data and persuasive flair, that his Jewish laborers were essential to the war effort. He sabotaged his own factory's output of usable munitions while maintaining a facade of vital productivity, understanding that within the Nazi logic, economic utility could, temporarily, trump ideological purity. He turned the Nazi doctrine of Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, on its head, making it, in his factory, a literal truth. The list as a sacred contract. The compilation of Schindler's List was the ultimate synthesis of his pragmatism and his newfound moral purpose. It was a bureaucratic document, a cold, typed ledger of names. Yet, in its creation, it was transformed into a sacred covenant. Each name represented a life bargained for, a future purchased from the abyss. The list was not an act of sentiment, but one of immense, calculated effort, requiring him to risk his fortune and his life to negotiate with the SS for the transfer of his workers to the relative safety of his new factory in Brunlitz. The philosophy of the second self and the burden of responsibility Schindler's transformation can be analyzed through an existentialist lens. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence precedes essence, meaning that humans are not born with a fixed nature, but define themselves through their actions and choices. Schindler, in a very real sense, created his essence through a continuous series of decisions. He was not a hero by nature. He became one by doing. he cultivated what can be termed a second self. The first self was the public persona of the loyal Nazi industrialist, the jovial host of parties for SS officials. This was a necessary performance, a mask worn to enable the actions of the second, truer self, the secret savior. This duality was not a mark of hypocrisy, but a strategic necessity for survival and efficacy. It speaks to a profound understanding that in a totalitarian system, overt resistance is often swiftly crushed, while subversive action, cloaked in compliance, can achieve monumental ends. Furthermore, the philosophy of responsibility articulated by the Jewish Talmudic tradition, whoever saves a single life, it is as if he has saved the whole world, found its ultimate expression in Schindler's actions. He internalized this burden, not as an abstract religious principle, but as a tangible, pressing obligation to the specific individuals under his care. His famous breakdown at the war's end, lamenting that he could have saved more lives by selling his car his gold pin, reveals the immense weight of this personal responsibility. It was a grief born not of failure, but of a conscience that had expanded to encompass the fates of hundreds. The economics of altruism, the inversion of value. Schindler's journey represents a complete inversion of his personal economic system. He began by spending money to make money. He ended by spending money to save lives, ultimately bankrupting himself in the process. The enamelware factory, once a symbol of his opportunistic greed, became a loss-making enterprise sustained only by his dwindling personal fortune, used as a front to protect his workers. The shells it produced were deliberately defective, a silent act of sabotage against the very war effort he pretended to serve. This economic self-destruction is the most powerful evidence of his metamorphosis. It demonstrates a radical redefinition of value. What he valued at the end was not capital, but human life. His wealth, which he had once pursued so assiduously, became a currency for the purchase of time, dignity, and survival. This aligns with a key tenet of logotherapy, as developed by his contemporary, Viktor Frankl, that the discovery of meaning is the primary motivational force in human life. Schindler found a meaning so profound that it rendered his previous pursuits, wealth, status, pleasure, utterly meaningless by comparison. Next part, the legacy of ambiguity. Schindler as a moral archetype and the psychology of altruism. The Schindler's Jews and the testimony of the saved. The ultimate validation of Schindler's positive action lies not in his own account, but in the legacy of those he saved, the Schindler Juden and their descendants, who number in the thousands today. Their continued existence is a living, breathing repudiation of the Nazi project of annihilation. The post-war testimonies collected by writers like Thomas Keneally and the Shoah Foundation reveal a complex portrait of their savior. Not a saint, but a flawed, charismatic, and ultimately decisive man who chose to use his power for good. This community became the custodians of his memory, ensuring that his story was not lost to history. Their collective witness transforms Schindler's individual act into a communal narrative of survival and gratitude. It creates a chain of memory that actively fights the forgetting that the perpetrators sought to impose. The saved, in their very being, became a permanent historical and ethical argument against nihilism and for the power of individual intervention. The psychological and sociological dimensions of altruism. Schindler's case provides a rich case study for psychologists and sociologists seeking to understand the roots of altruism and moral courage in extreme situations. What differentiates a Schindler from a Goth? Research in this area suggests that rescuers often possess several key characteristics, many of which Schindler exhibited. Empathic concern, the ability to identify with the suffering of others, which in Schindler's case grew over time. a sense of personal responsibility, the belief that one has the power and the duty to act, which Schindler manifested in his meticulous efforts to protect his Jews. Social independence, the capacity to resist group pressure and think for oneself. Schindler's inherent rebelliousness and maverick nature, once a liability, became his greatest asset. A network and resourcefulness. Rescuers are often pragmatic individuals with the social skills and resources to effectively help others. Schindler was the epitome of this. His story demonstrates that heroism is not a mystical quality, but a potential that exists within a spectrum of human personalities, awaiting activation under the right, or tragically wrong, circumstances. It refutes the notion that people are simply products of their environment, arguing instead for the enduring power of agency. The enduring philosophical challenge, the flawed savior, and the nature of goodness. Oskar Schindler remains a profoundly ambiguous figure, and it is this very ambiguity that makes his story so philosophically potent and universally resonant. He was an adulterer, a gambler, a drunkard, and a war profiteer. He was not a moral paragon from the outset. This complexity saves him from hagiography and forces us to confront a more difficult and profound truth, that goodness is not the exclusive domain of the pure, but can emerge from the most compromised and unlikely of vessels. His legacy challenges us to move beyond binary judgments of good and evil. It presents a model of moral awakening that is accessible precisely because it is imperfect. It suggests that our past actions do not irrevocably define our future potential for good. The story of Oskar Schindler is, at its core, a story of redemption. It is a testament to the idea that conscience can be awakened, that empathy can be learned, and that even in a world saturated with evil, a single individual, armed with cunning, courage, and a gradually unfolding compassion, can become an unlikely architect of life. His list was more than a roster of names. It was a manifesto of hope, a definitive argument for the power of positive, pragmatic, and relentless action in the face of overwhelming darkness. It stands as a permanent question posed to every subsequent generation. What would you do? And a permanent reminder that it is never too late to begin building your own list. Next part, the legacy of ambiguity, Schindler as a moral archetype, and the psychology of altruism, continued. The dialectics of salvation, Schindler's method as a philosophical blueprint. Schindler's approach to salvation presents a fascinating dialectic between pragmatism and morality that warrants deeper philosophical examination. His methodology reveals what might be termed applied moral philosophy under conditions of extreme duress. Each action he took represented a synthesis between the brutal reality of the Nazi system and his emerging ethical imperative. This was not moral purity operating in a vacuum, but moral intelligence operating within constraints. The factory itself became a liminal space, what philosopher Michel Foucault might call a heterotopia, a real place that functioned in relation to all other spaces as a kind of countersite. Within the geography of annihilation, Schindler's factories in Krakow and Brunlitz became islands where the normal rules of the Nazi universe were suspended. Here, the value of a human being was measured not by racial purity, but by their inclusion on a list. Survival was guaranteed not by biological destiny, but by industrial necessity. Schindler understood that to save lives, he had to work within the system's own logic, while subtly subverting its aims. This approach offers a blueprint for moral action in compromised circumstances. Schindler demonstrated that effective ethical intervention often requires understanding the system's rules well enough to exploit its weaknesses, maintaining the appearance of compliance, while pursuing opposition, using the system's own values, like productivity and efficiency, to protect higher values, recognizing that imperfect action is preferable to pure inaction. The neuroethics of moral transformation, a scientific perspective. Modern neuroscience and moral psychology provide fascinating lenses through which to examine Schindler's transformation. The emerging field of neuroethics suggests that moral behavior involves complex interactions between emotional processing, cognitive control, and social cognition networks in the brain. Schindler's journey illustrates several key principles of moral development. The role of emotional engagement. His initial emotional responses to witnessing violence likely triggered neural mechanisms involving the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, regions associated with empathy and distress. Detection. Cognitive reappraisal. His gradual reframing of the Jewish workers from means to profit to ends in themselves represents a fundamental shift in moral valuation, possibly involving the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. The development of moral identity. As his actions accumulated, saving Jews became central to his self-concept. What neuroscientists might describe as the integration of moral decisions into autobiographical memory and self-representation networks. Schindler's journey illustrates several key principles of moral development. The role of emotional engagement. His initial emotional responses to witnessing violence likely triggered neural mechanisms involving the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, regions associated with empathy and distress detection. Cognitive reappraisal. His gradual reframing of the Jewish workers from means to profit to ends in themselves represents a fundamental shift in moral valuation, possibly involving the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. The development of moral identity. As his actions accumulated, saving Jews became central to his self-concept. What neuroscientists might describe as the integration of moral decisions into autobiographical memory and self-representation networks. Research on moral elevation, the emotional response to witnessing acts of moral beauty, suggests that Schindler's own actions may have created a positive feedback loop. Each successful intervention likely reinforced his moral identity, making subsequent actions easier to undertake. The historical reception and memorialization of Schindler's legacy. The post-war reception of Schindler's story reveals much about how societies process complex moral narratives. For years after the war, Schindler struggled financially and was largely unrecognized. His story only gained widespread attention through what might be called a memorialization cascade, beginning with the survivors he saved, expanding through Thomas Keneally's book, and culminating in Steven Spielberg's film. This process raises important questions about the politics of memory. Why are some rescue stories celebrated while others remain obscure? The aesthetics of heroism. How does popular culture reshape complex historical figures into archetypes? The burden of testimony. What responsibilities do survivors bear in preserving and transmitting these stories? The transformation of Schindler from forgotten figure to international symbol demonstrates how moral exemplars can be constructed and reconstructed across time, serving different cultural needs in different historical moments. Next part, Schindler's paradigm. Applications to contemporary moral philosophy and social psychology, the Schindler principle in modern ethics and leadership. The Schindler principle, that moral action often requires working within flawed systems while subverting their immoral aspects, has profound implications for contemporary ethics and leadership theory. This approach challenges purist notions of ethical behavior that demand complete separation from corrupt systems. In business ethics, Schindler's example suggests that corporate leaders can sometimes achieve more good by reforming systems from within than by protesting from outside. Pragmatic compromise need not mean moral surrender. Effective ethical leadership requires understanding organizational dynamics and power structures in political philosophy. Schindler's methods offer an alternative to both revolutionary purism and quietist accommodation. He represents what might be called the transformative infiltrator, someone who uses their position within a system to protect vulnerable people and create spaces of humanity. The psychology of moral courage, from bystander to upstander. Schindler's transformation from passive beneficiary of an unjust system to active resistor provides a powerful case study in the psychology of moral courage. Research in social psychology has identified several factors that can help overcome the bystander effect. Personal responsibility. Schindler's sense of responsibility toward his Jews grew as he came to know them individually. Moral modeling. While Schindler had few models for rescue, his actions themselves became models for others who assisted him. Gradual commitment. His involvement began with small acts of kindness and escalated gradually, illustrating the foot in the door phenomenon in moral development. Social support. His collaboration with others like Itzhak Stern created a community of resistance that sustained his efforts. Contemporary applications of these principles can be seen in programs that train people to intervene against bullying, discrimination, and other social harms. The limits and possibilities of individual action. While celebrating Schindler's achievements, it's crucial to acknowledge the structural limitations he faced. He could only save a tiny fraction of those threatened by the Nazi genocide. This raises profound questions about the efficacy of individual action against systemic evil. However, Schindler's story also demonstrates that individual actions can have multiplicative effects through the lives saved and their descendants. Moral resistance creates important historical counter-narratives to stories of universal complicity. Even limited actions can maintain the possibility of humanity in inhuman conditions. The philosophical significance lies not in the numbers saved, but in the proof that moral agency persisted even in conditions designed to extinguish it. Conclusion. This part. The enduring significance of Schindler's moral journey. Oskar Schindler's story continues to resonate because it represents one of the most compelling modern examples of moral transformation under extreme circumstances. His journey from cynicism to commitment, from exploitation to redemption, challenges simplified notions of good and evil while affirming the possibility of moral growth. The philosophical implications of his story are manifold. First, it demonstrates that moral development is not linear or predetermined, but emerges from the interaction between character, circumstance, and conscious choice. Schindler's vices, his charm, his cunning, his comfort with deception, became virtues when redirected toward moral ends. Second, it suggests that effective moral action in complex systems requires pragmatic engagement rather than purist withdrawal. Schindler's genius lay in his ability to use the system's own logic against its immoral purposes. Third, it affirms the power of personal relationships as catalysts for moral change. Schindler's transformation was propelled by his growing personal connection to the individuals he employed. Finally, Schindler's legacy poses an enduring challenge to each generation to recognize our own capacity for moral blindness and our potential for moral courage. His story asks us to consider what lists we might compile in our own contexts, what injustices we might confront, what vulnerable people we might protect, what systems we might subvert for moral ends. In the end, Schindler's List was more than a document. It was a testament to the claim that one person's choices matter, that moral awakening can come at any moment, and that even in the darkest times, the light of conscience can be kindled and nurtured into a flame that saves, that remembers, and that redeems. Next part. Schindler's phenomenology, the architecture of moral choice in extremis. The hermeneutics of rescue. interpreting moral action through existential frameworks. Schindler's actions demand examination through existential philosophy's lens, particularly Martin Heidegger's concept of being toward death, Sehnsucht. In the face of systematic annihilation, Schindler's workers existed in a constant state of existential threat. His intervention created what might be termed being toward life, a temporal space where future possibilities remained open. This represents a fundamental philosophical resistance to what Emmanuel Levinas identified as the totalizing impulse of Nazi ideology, which sought to erase alterity and difference. The phenomenology of Schindler's moral decisions reveals temporal restructuring. His actions created what phenomenologists call lived time, temps vico, distinct from the homogeneous, destructive time of the camps. Spatial reconfiguration. The factory became what Gaston Bachelard might call a space of protection against the hostile space of the concentrationary universe. Intersubjective transformation. Relationships within the factory developed what Karl Jaspers termed existential communication, authentic connection beyond utilitarian purposes. The economics of salvation, a philosophical accounting. Schindler's financial expenditure for saving lives presents a profound case study in value theory. His progressive bankruptcy represents what philosopher Georges Bouteille might call a productive expenditure, spending that creates meaning rather than capital. This inverts conventional capitalist logic, creating what might be termed a moral economy, where value is measured in human lives preserved rather than profit accumulated. Expenditure becomes investment in ethical rather than financial capital. Wealth transforms from object of acquisition to instrument of salvation. The accounting books of the factory became, in essence, moral ledgers where the traditional columns of debit and credit were replaced by more fundamental categories of life and death. Next part, contemporary applications. The Schindler paradigm in modern contexts. Corporate social responsibility through Schindler's lens. Modern business ethics can draw significant lessons from Schindler's example. Stakeholder theory reimagined. Schindler treated his Jewish workers not as means to profit, but as ends in themselves, prefiguring later stakeholder theory, a moral entrepreneurship. His approach demonstrates how business structures can be leveraged for ethical purposes beyond their intended design. The ethics of complicity. Schindler's story helps navigate the complex moral terrain of operating within questionable systems while maintaining ethical integrity. Psychological applications, from bystander to moral actor. Contemporary psychology has developed interventions based on principles observable in Schindler's transformation. Moral identity development, programs that help individuals integrate moral values into their self-concept. Empathy cultivation, techniques to bridge the empathy gap that allows discrimination and inaction. Moral courage training, methods to develop the capacity to act according to values despite social pressure. Educational implications, teaching moral complexity. Schindler's story provides powerful pedagogical opportunities, nuanced heroism, challenging simplistic moral binaries in character education. Historical empathy, developing capacity to understand complex moral decisions in historical context. Ethical decision-making, using case studies from Schindler's experience to teach practical ethics. Next part, philosophical extensions. Beyond the historical Schindler, the Schindler archetype in moral philosophy. Schindler's story contributes to several ongoing philosophical discussions. Moral luck, how circumstances shape moral opportunity and responsibility of virtue ethics. The relationship between character, habit, and moral action. A moral psychology, the interaction between emotion, reasoning, and moral behavior. The limits of the analogy, philosophical precautions. While Schindler's story offers rich philosophical material, certain cautions are necessary. Contextual specificity. The extreme conditions of the Holocaust limit direct application to ordinary circumstances, moral hazard. The celebration of rescue should not obscure the condemnation of the systems that make rescue necessary, commemorative ethics. The risks of instrumentalizing historical trauma for philosophical purposes. Next part, conclusion. The enduring challenge of Schindler's legacy. Synthesis. The multidimensional significance of moral action. Schindler's story ultimately demonstrates that moral significance operates on multiple levels. Individual. The transformation of personal character and values are interpersonal. The creation of ethical relationships amid systematic dehumanization are systemic. The strategic manipulation of structures for moral ends historical. The creation of counter-narratives to totalizing ideologies of philosophical. The illumination of fundamental questions about human nature and morality. The unfinished project of moral understanding. Schindler's legacy continues to challenge us because it resists final interpretation. He remains a figure of moral complexity rather than simple heroism, a case study in the possibilities and limits of individual agency, our reminder of the ongoing need for moral vigilance, an inspiration for creative ethical action in constrained circumstances. The ultimate philosophical significance of Schindler's List may lie in its demonstration that moral accounting requires different ledgers than conventional success, that true wealth is measured in lives touched and preserved, and that the most important balances are not financial but ethical. His story continues to ask the most fundamental question. In the accounting of a human life, what ultimately counts? Schindler's answer, that every number has a name, every statistic a story, and every life infinite value, remains his enduring challenge to posterity. Next part, the epistemology of moral action, understanding how we know what is right. Moral intuition versus rational calculation in Schindler's decisions. Schindler's transformation presents a fascinating case study in moral epistemology, how we come to know what is right. His initial actions suggest a form of moral intuitionism, where ethical knowledge emerges not from rational calculation but from immediate, perceptual awareness of moral truths. When witnessing the brutality of the Krakow ghetto liquidation, Schindler didn't arrive at his moral position through logical deduction. Rather, he experienced what philosophers might call a moral perception, an immediate apprehension of the wrongness of the situation. This aligns with the ethical intuitionism of philosophers like G. Moore and W. D. Ross, who argued that moral truths are self-evident to properly functioning moral agents. Schindler's gradual awakening demonstrates how moral knowledge can emerge through a direct witnessing of injustice, personal relationships with victims, emotional responses to suffering, what Martha Nussbaum calls the fragility of goodness, the recognition of our shared vulnerability. The role of moral imagination in ethical transformation. Schindler's ability to envision alternative possibilities, what philosopher Mark Johnson terms moral imagination, was crucial to his transformation. This capacity allowed him to imagine a different future for his workers, envision himself as a protector rather than profiteer, see potential solutions where others saw only constraints, create what philosopher Charles Taylor calls moral sources, new frameworks of meaning that motivate ethical action. His moral imagination enabled him to reconfigure reality, seeing the factory not just as a means of production, but as a sanctuary, and his workers not as commodities, but as persons with inherent dignity. Next part, the social ontology of rescue. How moral action creates new social realities. constructing moral communities in hostile environments. Schindler's factory became what social philosophers might call a counter-institution, a social formation that resists dominant power structures while creating alternative moral communities. This demonstrates how moral action can generate new social realities through establishing alternative norms and values, creating spaces for authentic human relationships, developing what Axel Honneth calls recognition orders that affirm human dignity, building what Margaret Archer terms corporate agency, collective capacity for moral action. The social world Schindler created within his factories exhibited what philosopher John Searle might call different institutional facts, shared understandings that created a reality where Jewish workers were valued persons rather than disposable objects. The phenomenology of moral resistance, the daily acts of resistance in Schindler's factories, represent what might be termed a microethics of survival. Small-scale moral actions that collectively constituted significant resistance. This includes the maintenance of personal dignity amid dehumanization, the preservation of cultural and religious practices, the creation of what James C. Scott calls hidden transcripts, discrete forms of resistance, the cultivation of what Viktor Frankl identified as the last human freedom, choosing one's attitude in any circumstance. Next part, the hermeneutics of memory, how we interpret and transmit moral legacies. The ethics of commemoration and historical representation. The way Schindler's story has been remembered and transmitted raises important philosophical questions about the ethics of representing trauma, the politics of memory, and what Paul Ricoeur called the historiographical operation, how we construct historical narratives, the tension between historical accuracy and moral education. The transformation of Schindler from historical figure to cultural symbol demonstrates what Jan Assmann terms cultural memory, how societies remember and reinterpret significant past events to serve contemporary moral needs. The phenomenology of moral exemplars. Schindler's status as a moral exemplar raises philosophical questions about how such figures function in our moral ecology. Moral exemplars like Schindler serve as what Linda Zagzebski calls exemplars who attract emulation, provide concrete models of virtue in action, create what Alastair MacIntyre might call narrative unity, in moral life demonstrate the possibility of moral transformation. Next part, contemporary ethical applications. Schindler's relevance, today moral leadership in complex organizations. Schindler's example offers insights for contemporary leadership ethics, particularly regarding the ethical decision-making in morally complex environments, what Joseph Badaracco calls defining moments in leadership, the balance between pragmatic effectiveness and moral principles, creating ethical organizational cultures. Global ethics and humanitarian intervention. Schindler's story provides a framework for thinking about contemporary global ethical challenges, including the ethics of intervention in humanitarian crises, individual responsibility in addressing systemic injustice, what Peter Singer calls the expanding circle of moral concern, the tension between political realism and moral idealism in international relations. Next part, conclusion. The enduring philosophical significance. Schindler as philosophical case. Study Oskar Schindler's story continues to merit philosophical attention because it represents what might be called a thick moral phenomenon, one that illuminates multiple dimensions of ethical life simultaneously. It demonstrates the complex relationship between character and circumstance, the possibility of moral growth and transformation, the creative potential of moral agency in constrained situations, the enduring power of human connection amid dehumanization. The unfinished project of moral understanding. Schindler's legacy continues to challenge philosophers because it resists easy categorization and final interpretation. It raises persistent questions about the nature of moral motivation, the relationship between self-interest and altruism, the possibility of measuring moral worth, the limits and possibilities of individual action. His story remains what Hans-Georg Gadamer might call an affective historical phenomenon, one that continues to generate new meanings and interpretations across time, always inviting us to reconsider what it means to live an ethical life in a complex and often morally challenging world. The ultimate philosophical significance of Schindler's List may be that it represents both a specific historical document and a timeless moral challenge, asking each generation to consider what names would appear on their own list, what values would guide their choices, and what legacy they would leave in the accounting of human conscience. Summary: the philosophical and historical synthesis of the Oskar Schindler phenomenon. The phenomenon of Oskar Schindler stands as a profound case study in the transformation of moral consciousness, demonstrating a journey from pragmatic opportunism to a stance of profound existential responsibility. This metamorphosis was not a sudden epiphany, but a gradual awakening of conscience, catalyzed by direct, personal encounters with the other, the individual human faces whose suffering breached the walls of his cynicism and compelled a radical reevaluation of human value beyond any utilitarian calculation. His story provides a powerful phenomenology of moral resistance, illustrating the creation of what can be termed heterotopias, insulated spaces of alternative morality constructed within the very heart of a totalitarian system. Schindler's genius lay in his strategic exploitation of systemic contradictions, performing a unique alchemy by which his personal vices, manipulativeness, corruption, and deception, were transmuted into vital instruments of salvation. This journey speaks to a distinct epistemology of moral choice, where the knowledge of good was apprehended not through abstract principles, but through the visceral, immediate reality of individual human beings. It was his moral imagination, the capacity to envision alternative possibilities for action and identity, that enabled this shift, forging a powerful and effective dialectical unity between stark pragmatism and profound idealism. Furthermore, Schindler's actions generated a new social ontology of resistance, showcasing how moral communities can be constructed amidst institutional evil. He reconfigured economic structures into tools of ethical defiance, thereby establishing an alternative system of value and recognition that stood in direct opposition to the dehumanizing logic of the regime. The enduring philosophical legacy of Oskar Schindler fundamentally challenges simplistic, binary categories of hero and villain. Instead, he embodies the complex and unsettling possibility of moral growth and redemption within the most compromised of circumstances. He serves as a potent model of the transformative infiltrator, demonstrating that systemic change can sometimes be effected from within through strategic, subversive action. Ultimately, Schindler's List transcends its status as a historical document to become a permanent question posed to the human conscience, a perpetual call to compile our own lists within the context of contemporary ethical challenges. The paramount conclusion is that the moral significance of such actions is measured not merely in the statistics of lives saved, but in their powerful demonstration that ethical agency can persist and even flourish in conditions specifically engineered for its annihilation. I truly hope these ideas will inspire you on your own path of discovery. If you know someone who would find this perspective valuable, please share this video with them. And to make sure you don't miss what's next, subscribe and join me for the upcoming videos.